I said enough about a man who once was a professor at Princeton, who went to Harvard, who has a law degree, a master's from Oxford, and I could go on, but I'm not going to because I want him to go on for your benefit. Ethan Nadelman. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Tom. I really appreciate that, and Angela as well. I mean, I have to. This is my first time ever in Montana. I had no idea what to expect. I did not think I'd be walking in a room and have a couple hundred people coming to a cannabis event like this. This is fantastic. In Bozeman, living in Manhattan, New York, you just have no idea what to expect. The other thing I should say is that I came out here. Tom initially invited me because there was a conference going on at the hotel next door of physicians and nurses who specialize in the management of pain. Right? Some of them are prescribing for marijuana, but a lot of them working with the opioid medications and others. I was talking to them. When I got the invitation, I was thinking, oh, damn, it's Rosh Hashanah, the Jewish New Year, and I grew up traditionally like. Turns out there's a synagogue in Bozeman, you know, so who knew, you know, with 100 families belonging to it. So some of the members of the legislature, you know, were, you know, members as well. So I went over there last night, came over here this morning, came over to give a speech, but I'm very happy to be here. I'm very inspired. I think also in this part of the country, which in New York is all like this, but I mean, it's not happening in Idaho or Wyoming or North Dakota or something in South Dakota, right? It is happening in Washington and Oregon, but you guys are a place where you're doing something and making something happen. And seeing the bills going through the legislature, seeing the margin by which medical marijuana won here in 2004 is inspiring. So I feel we are at a moment now where things are really opening up in a way I can't believe. But what Tom asked me to do was he said, you know, give these folks here a little bit of historical perspective on this stuff. Because some of you may not know how this stuff happens. So just to fill you in, because what we are doing is we are building a political movement. That is what this is about. It is a political movement to end the war on drugs as we know it in our society. That's what it's about. What that requires is some perspective on this stuff. You know, one of the things, I mean, I'm focused on the marijuana effort, but not only the marijuana reform effort. I'm talking about all the people getting beaten up and incarcerated and locked up for long periods of time for other drugs. And I may not say that the other drugs should be treated the same way as marijuana. We all know it's different. We all can love our marijuana and know that's something you want to stay away from. But nonetheless, the war on drugs over there is not right either. What Americans doing around the world is not right either. But I'm also going to just push you all, because I think some of you are going to assume you're with me on every single thing I say, and I feel if I don't quite say something that makes you each go, oh, wait a second, then maybe I'm not doing my job. Because here's what I think is going on. In America, we're Americans, and we got a big country, and we tend not to look at what other people are doing, how they're learning to live with things, what we do, put in perspective. I'm going to give you a few stats, and they're easy ones to remember, because they're useful and they're persuasive with anybody you end up talking to. We, United States, we got less than 5% of the world's population. We have almost 25% of the world's incarcerated population. Got that? 5, 25. About 300 million people out of 6.5 billion people. Right? We rank first in the world in the per capita incarceration of our fellow citizens. First in the world, 5 to 10 times greater than other countries in Europe and other sort of places we can compare ourselves to. The Russians are number 2, keep huffing and puffing, keep up. They can't do it, right? We are number 1. We have left there in the dust. And this is, of course, nothing to be proud of. We have the highest rate of incarceration of any democratic society in history. And it's increased dramatically just in the last 30 years. 1980, 500,000 people behind bars. Now we've got 2.3 million people behind bars. From 500,000 to 2.3 million people behind bars. 1 out of every 100 Americans is behind bars today. Right? Now people say, why is that? Why do we lock up so many people? Why? Right? And I think we've lost perspective. Why? Is it that we have much higher rates of crime than a lot of these other countries? No. In fact, our rates of nonviolent crime are roughly the same in a lot of other countries in Europe. Do we have much higher rates of drug use? People say that all the time. It's not that true. Those Europeans are smoking weed, they're doing coke, they're doing stuff like that. We may do a bit more of it, but we are not We have more violent crime, more gun crime, but that doesn't explain why the prisons are so full. You go to the federal prison, you're talking about over 50% of the men and like 70% of the women are there for a drug law violation. You look in the state prisons, there's over 20% of the men and 30% of the women, not counting all the people getting locked up because they're on probation or parole, among the 5 million people on probation or parole, and they got a dirty urine for pot or a dirty urine for something else. It's the drug war driving this thing. We've gone from 50,000 people behind bars back in 1980 to over 500,000 people tonight for a drug law violation. Over 500,000 people tonight for a drug law violation. And a few 100,000 more for probation and parole violations related to drugs, but doesn't count you as a drug offender. And other people who get addicted and they steal or prostitute or whatever to support their habit or shoplift, and they're behind bars. And then you got the people shooting, engaging in acts of violence with one another because they're in the drug business, and you got to defend your turf. And inevitably, somebody's ripping you off, somebody this and that. You don't take it to a judge, right? It's illegal, right? It's about that. So we're talking about something like a third of the American prison system, and maybe more, being behind bars for something related to the war on drugs, right? Now, if you think about that, you also think it's not just that we're quicker to put people behind bars than almost anybody else. It's not just that when we keep them, put them in prison, we keep them there for longer than most other societies do. It's not just that when we take them, put them out, we make it much easier to throw them back in for a dirty urine, a failed probation, parole, whatever it might be. But it's also we treat people as second-class, third-class citizens, oftentimes for the rest of their lives. Many states you can't vote if you've been in prison or have a felony conviction or been on parole. Many states you can't ever get government benefits again. You can't get a scholarship. I mean, there's crazy issues that go on. It is the point. I can tell you that if our laws with respect to voting and how we treat people behind bars and former felons, if our laws about that were the same as they were in other countries, right, just letting people vote who are behind bars or outside, the 2000 election and the 2004 election would have turned out totally differently. Just the people locked up on drug law violations, just that group alone would have flipped the election the other way. That's the magnitude of what we're talking about. So I don't